I should have known something was wrong the moment I bought a house in the Pinewood Estates development in Burlington, Vermont. But the place was perfect. 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, a garage that could fit 2 cars, and a driveway that curved up from the street in a way that made me feel like I had really made it in life. The realtor had mentioned something about a homeowners association, but I brushed it off because what could possibly go wrong with a few neighbors making sure everyone kept their lawns trimmed? That was 3 months ago, and now I was standing in my living room at 6:30 in the morning, staring out the window at a mountain of snow that completely blocked my driveway. Not just a little pile, mind you, but an actual mountain that had to be at least 8 feet tall and stretched the entire width of my driveway entrance. I had nowhere to go. My truck was trapped in the garage, and I had an important meeting at 9 that I absolutely could not miss. I grabbed my phone and stepped outside, still in my pajama pants and winter coat, my breath forming clouds in the frigid February air. The temperature had to be around 15 degrees, and my bare feet in slippers were already going numb on the frozen concrete. I took several photos of the snow pile, making sure to capture how it completely blocked access to my property. Then I noticed something that made my blood boil even more than it already was. Tire tracks from a plow truck leading directly away from my driveway, heading toward the community center parking lot 2 blocks down. This was not an accident. This was deliberate. I stomped back inside and immediately called the HOA office number listed on the welcome packet I had received when I moved in. The phone rang 4 times before a woman answered with a voice that could have curdled milk. Pinewood Estates, HOA. This is Margaret speaking. Hi, yes, this is Vincent Brennan at 428 Maple Ridge Drive. Someone just plowed a massive pile of snow blocking my entire driveway, and I need it moved immediately. I have to get to work. There was a pause on the other end, and I could hear papers shuffling. Mr. Brennan, let me look into this. The HOA contracted snow removal services last night due to the storm. I will have to check with our property manager. Check with whoever you need to check with, but I need this fixed now. I cannot get out of my driveway. Sir, I understand your frustration, but these things take time. I will have someone call you back within 24 to 48 hours. I nearly dropped the phone. 24 to 48 hours. Are you kidding me? I have a job. I have places to be. You cannot just block someone's driveway and tell them to wait 2 days for a call back. Mr. Brennan, I suggest you review your HOA Handbook, Section 12, Paragraph 4, which clearly states that snow removal is conducted at the discretion of the property management team, and individual accommodations cannot be guaranteed during severe weather events. There was not even that much snow last night, maybe 4 inches. This is a pile of snow that someone deliberately pushed in front of my house. I will make a note of your complaint. Someone will be in touch. The line went dead. I stood there in my kitchen, staring at my phone in disbelief. This was insane. I quickly called my boss and explained the situation, and thankfully he was understanding, but I could hear the disappointment in his voice. This meeting had been scheduled for weeks, and now I was going to miss it because some HOA snow plow driver decided my driveway was the perfect dumping ground for half the neighborhood's snow. I threw on actual clothes and boots and went outside with a shovel. If they were not going to fix this, I would do it myself. I started digging into the pile and immediately realized this was going to be impossible. The snow was packed solid from the plow, almost like ice, and each shovelful felt like I was chipping away at concrete. After 20 minutes of back-breaking work, I had barely made a dent, and my arms were already screaming in protest. That was when I saw her. A woman in her mid-40s with short blonde hair styled in what I can only describe as the classic speak-to-your-manager cut, walking down the sidewalk with a clipboard. She was wearing a puffy purple jacket and had the kind of expression on her face that suggested she smelled something unpleasant at all times. "Excuse me," she called out, her voice sharp. "What are you doing?" I stopped shoveling and turned to face her. "I am trying to clear my driveway that your snowplow blocked. I am Patricia Donovan, president of the Pinewood Estates HOA board, and I need to inform you that you are in violation of community guidelines." I actually laughed. "I am in violation. Your snowplow blocked my driveway." She consulted her clipboard with an exaggerated motion. "According to the community bylaws, all snow removal must be conducted by HOA-approved contractors. Residents are not permitted to perform their own snow removal, as it creates an inconsistent aesthetic throughout the neighborhood." "You have got to be joking." "I never joke about community standards, Mr. Brennan. I ran your address. You are also in violation of Section 8, subsection 3, regarding unauthorized vehicle storage. Your truck has been parked in your driveway on 3 separate occasions in the past month, and the driveway is for temporary parking only. All vehicles must be stored in the garage when not in use." I felt heat rising in my chest despite the freezing temperature. My truck was in my driveway for maybe 20 minutes while I unloaded groceries. And right now, it is in my garage where it is trapped because of this snow pile. Regardless, violations have been noted. You will receive a formal citation in the mail within 3 to 5 business days. Each violation carries a $50 fine. She made a note on her clipboard with a pen that she pulled from her pocket with the kind of flourish that suggested she really enjoyed this. "So let me get this straight. You block my driveway, making it impossible for me to go to work, and then you fine me for trying to fix the problem. The snow was placed in the most practical location based on the plowing route. Your driveway entrance simply happened to be the designated snow deposit area for this section of the neighborhood. This is my property. You cannot just dump snow on my property." Patricia sighed like I was a child who was not understanding simple instructions. "Actually, Mr. Brennan, if you review your HOA agreement that you signed when you purchased your home, you will see that you granted the HOA easement rights for necessary maintenance and snow removal operations. This includes the right to temporarily utilize any portion of your property for snow storage during winter months. It is all perfectly legal." I wanted to argue, but I had a sinking feeling she might actually be right. I had signed so many papers at closing that I had not read every single line of the HOA agreement. That was clearly a mistake. "When will this snow be removed from my driveway?" "When temperatures rise enough for natural melting to occur, or when the HOA board determines it is financially prudent to contract additional removal services. Given the current budget constraints, I would estimate sometime in late March or early April. That is over a month away." "Weather dependent, of course." She smiled, and it was the kind of smile that made me understand why people use the word insufferable. "This is completely unacceptable. I am calling a lawyer." "You are certainly within your rights to pursue legal action. Though I should mention that the HOA agreement also includes a mandatory arbitration clause, and any legal fees incurred by the HOA in defending frivolous complaints will be added to your monthly dues." "Have a wonderful day, Mr. Brennan." She turned and walked away, her boots crunching on the frozen sidewalk. I stood there in my driveway, shovel in hand, staring at this mountain of snow and feeling more powerless than I had in years. I went back inside and immediately started searching through the box of paperwork from when I bought the house. It took me an hour, but I finally found the HOA agreement buried under the title papers. I read through the entire thing and my heart sank with every page. Patricia was right. I had signed away, basically, every right to my own property. The HOA could fine me for anything from having the wrong color mailbox to parking on the street overnight. They had easement rights for maintenance. They could even enter my property without notice for inspections. And there, in Section 19, was the mandatory arbitration clause that essentially made it financially impossible to sue them. I felt trapped. I called my neighbor, an older man named Robert who had lived in the neighborhood for 10 years. He answered on the third ring. "Vincent, how are you doing?" "Not great, Robert. The HOA just dumped a mountain of snow in my driveway and told me I have to wait until April for it to melt. Did this happen to you last winter?" There was a long pause. "Yeah, they did it to me my first year here. Blocked my driveway for 3 weeks. I complained and they hit me with so many fines that I just gave up and kept my head down. Patricia runs that HOA like a dictatorship. My advice: do not make waves. It only gets worse if you fight back." "That is insane. How is this legal?" "It probably is not, but who has the money to fight it? Most people here just deal with it. Some of the residents tried to vote her out last year, but she controls all the proxies. She basically owns the board." After I hung up with Robert, I sat at my kitchen table and tried to think of a solution. I could not afford to miss more work. I could not afford to fight a legal battle with the HOA. But I also could not just accept this. There had to be something I could do. That was when I remembered something. During my first week in the neighborhood, I had gone for a walk to familiarize myself with the area. Behind the community center, there was a small building that housed the HOA office. And right next to that building was an emergency exit with a sign that read, "Keep clear at all times, fire code requirement." An idea started forming in my mind. It was probably a terrible idea. It would definitely make things worse. But at this point, I was angry enough not to care. I waited until dark. Around 8 in the evening, I put on my warmest clothes and walked to my garage. My truck was still trapped, but I had another tool at my disposal, a snow blower that I had purchased back in December. It was a powerful machine, the kind with a motor that could throw snow 30 feet. I had used it exactly once to clear my driveway after a storm, back before I knew the HOA had rules about that too. I fired up the snow blower and started working on the pile in my driveway. It was slow going because the snow was packed so hard, but the machine was strong enough to break through it. I worked for 3 solid hours, slowly carving a path through the massive pile. But instead of blowing the snow onto my lawn or the street, I collected it. I adjusted the chute and created a new pile on the sidewalk beside my property, carefully shaping it. By 11 at night, I had cleared enough space to get my truck out. I pulled it out of the garage, positioned it near the new pile I had created, and attached a small utility trailer that I used for hauling things to the dump. Then I started shoveling snow into the trailer, load after load. My back ached. My arms felt like rubber. But I kept going, fueled by pure spite and anger. At 1 in the morning, I drove my truck with its trailer full of snow to the community center. The parking lot was empty, lit by a few streetlights that cast long shadows across the frozen pavement. I backed up to the HOA office building, specifically positioning myself near that emergency exit I had remembered. Then I started unloading the snow. I piled it directly in front of the emergency exit, completely blocking the door. Trip after trip back to my house, filling the trailer with snow, driving to the community center, unloading it in front of that door. By 4 in the morning, I had created a wall of snow that was roughly 6 feet tall and completely blocked the emergency exit. You could not even see the door anymore. I stood back and looked at my work. It was petty. It was probably illegal, but it felt absolutely glorious. I drove home, put my truck back in the garage, and collapsed into bed. I slept until 10, which meant I had already missed the first half of my workday, but at this point, I was too exhausted to care. When I finally dragged myself out of bed and looked out the window, I noticed that the remaining snow pile in my driveway was significantly smaller. Still there, but manageable enough that I could actually get my truck out now if I needed to. I made coffee and was just starting to feel human again when my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost did not answer, but curiosity got the better of me. Mr. Brennan, this is Chief Edwards from the Burlington Fire Department. I need to speak with you about a very serious matter. My stomach dropped. Okay. We received a complaint this morning that the emergency exit at the Pinewood Estates Community Center has been blocked with snow. This is a severe fire code violation. Security footage from the parking lot shows your truck and trailer at the scene between 1 and 4 this morning. Did you block that emergency exit? I could have lied. I probably should have lied, but I was too tired and too angry. Yes, I did. Mr. Brennan, do you understand the severity of this situation? If there had been a fire or emergency in that building, people could have died because they could not use that exit. The building was empty. There is nobody in the HOA office at 1 in the morning. That is not the point. The exit must remain clear at all times. I am required to report this to the police, and you will likely face criminal charges for recklessly endangering public safety. Okay, I said, because what else could I say? For the record, the HOA blocked my driveway with an 8-foot pile of snow and told me I had to wait until April for it to melt. I could not get to work. I lost income. But apparently that is fine because they have an easement in some contract I signed. Chief Edwards was quiet for a moment. I understand you are frustrated, but blocking an emergency exit is never an acceptable response. You need to remove that snow immediately. I will remove it if they remove the snow from my driveway. Mr. Brennan, I am giving you until noon to clear that exit, or I will have the fire department do it and send you the bill. Additionally, the police will be contacting you shortly. He hung up. I sat there holding my phone, wondering if I had just completely destroyed my life over a snow pile. But then I thought about Patricia and her clipboard and that condescending smile, and I decided that even if I ended up in jail, at least I had made my point. At 11:30, there was a knock on my door. I opened it to find 2 police officers standing on my porch. One was a woman in her 30s with dark hair pulled back in a tight bun. The other was a man who looked like he was about ready to retire, with gray hair and a weathered face. Vincent Brennan, the woman asked. That is me. I am Officer Linda Martinez, and this is Officer Frank Sullivan. We need to talk to you about an incident at the Pinewood Estates Community Center. Come in, I said, stepping aside. They entered, and I offered them seats at my kitchen table. They declined but remained standing. Mr. Brennan, we have security footage showing you blocking the emergency exit at the community center with snow. Is that correct? Yes. Officer Sullivan shook his head. Why would you do something like that? I explained the entire situation. The snow pile blocking my driveway, missing work, Patricia and her threats of fines, the HOA agreement that gave them the right to basically do whatever they wanted. I showed them photos of my blocked driveway. I showed them the section of the HOA agreement about easements. Officer Martinez listened carefully, taking notes. When I finished, she exchanged a glance with her partner. Mr. Brennan, I understand your frustration, but what you did was dangerous and illegal. You blocked a fire exit. That is a crime. I know, and I will remove the snow, but I want to file a complaint against the HOA for blocking my driveway. Officer Sullivan rubbed his temples. This is technically a civil matter between you and the HOA. The driveway is on your property, but they apparently have a legal right to put snow there according to your contract. So they can block my driveway and nothing happens to them, but I block an empty building's emergency exit and I get criminal charges. The difference is that your action was a clear violation of fire safety codes, which are criminal statutes. The HOA's action, while arguably unethical, falls under civil contract law. I felt the anger rising again. This is completely unfair. Life often is, Officer Martinez said, not unkindly. Here is what is going to happen. You are going to go to the community center right now and clear that emergency exit. Every bit of snow, we will follow you there to make sure it gets done. Then, we are going to have a conversation with the HOA about their snow removal practices. We cannot force them to clear your driveway, but we can strongly suggest that they find a better solution for next time. And the criminal charges, that depends on a lot of factors. If you clear the exit immediately and cooperate fully, we might be able to resolve this with a citation and fine rather than formal charges. But you need to understand that what you did was serious. I nodded. What choice did I have? We all drove to the community center, me in my truck with a shovel, and the officers in their patrol car. The snow I had piled against the emergency exit had settled overnight and was now frozen into a solid mass. It took me nearly 2 hours of hard labor to clear it all away, with the officers watching to ensure I did a thorough job. By the time I finished, my hands were blistered and my back felt like it might never straighten again. As I was loading my shovel back into the truck, another car pulled into the parking lot. A silver Mercedes. Patricia stepped out, her face twisted in fury. "Officers, I demand you arrest this man immediately. He intentionally and maliciously vandalized HOA property and created a life-threatening situation." Officer Martinez turned to face her. "Miss Donovan, Mr. Brennan has cleared the emergency exit and is cooperating with our investigation. We need to speak with you about the HOA's snow removal practices. Our snow removal practices are none of your concern. We operate within the boundaries of our legal agreements with homeowners." Officer Sullivan pulled out his notepad. "Miss Donovan, we have seen the photographic evidence of Mr. Brennan's blocked driveway. An 8-foot pile of snow completely preventing access to his property. While this may be technically legal under your HOA agreement, it raises questions about reasonableness and possibly habitability. The HOA has complete authority over snow removal in this community. Mr. Brennan signed the agreement. If he has a problem with our practices, he can bring it up at the next board meeting." "When is the next board meeting?" I asked. Patricia glared at me. "May 15th. That is 3 months away. The board meets quarterly. It is in the bylaws." Officer Martinez stepped forward. "Miss Donovan, I strongly suggest the HOA clear Mr. Brennan's driveway within the next 48 hours. While we cannot legally compel you to do so, the alternative is that this situation continues to escalate, and nobody wants that. Are you threatening me, officer? I am suggesting a reasonable resolution to a conflict." Mr. Brennan made a poor choice in how he responded, but his underlying complaint is legitimate. He cannot access his property. That creates real hardship. Patricia crossed her arms. "The HOA board will discuss this matter at our next meeting. That is all I can promise." "The next meeting is in 3 months, Officer Sullivan said flatly. "That is not acceptable." "Then I suggest Mr. Brennan should have read his HOA agreement more carefully before purchasing his home. This conversation is over." She turned and walked toward the HOA office building. I looked at the officers. So that is it. I get in trouble and she just walks away, Officer Martinez sighed. Unfortunately, yes, she is not breaking any criminal laws. You did. I am sorry, but that is how it is. They gave me a citation for violating fire safety codes, which came with a $500 fine and a misdemeanor on my record. I drove home feeling defeated and frustrated. I had made my point, but at what cost? Over the next few days, I tried to research my legal options. I called 3 different lawyers, and they all told me basically the same thing. The HOA agreement I signed was ironclad, and fighting it would cost thousands of dollars with no guarantee of success. The mandatory arbitration clause meant I could not even take them to regular court without first going through an arbitrator that the HOA itself helped select. It was a rigged system. Meanwhile, the snow in my driveway was slowly melting, but not fast enough. I still had to park on the street and walk up to my house, which meant I was violating another HOA rule about overnight street parking. Sure enough, 3 days after the emergency exit incident, I received a formal citation in the mail. $50 fine for unauthorized street parking. I was being nickel and dimed to death by an organization that I was paying dues to in the first place. My monthly HOA dues were $250, which over the course of a year was $3,000. And for that money, I got snow piles in my driveway and constant threats of fines. I started attending the neighborhood coffee meetups at a local cafe, just to see if anyone else was dealing with similar issues. That was where I met David and Sarah Chen, a couple in their 40s who lived 4 streets over. "Oh, you are dealing with Patricia," Sarah said when I mentioned my situation. "She is the worst. She fined us $600 last year because our mailbox was the wrong shade of black." "What do you mean, wrong shade of black?" According to the HOA guidelines, all mailboxes must be painted matte black, no exceptions. Ours was apparently semi-gloss. We had no idea until we got a citation. When we tried to fight it, she added additional fines for each week we did not comply. David leaned forward. "The thing is, Patricia makes money from these fines." "Well, the HOA does, and she controls the HOA budget. The more fines she collects, the bigger the operating budget and the bigger her salary as HOA president. It is a massive conflict of interest, but nobody has been able to stop her. How is she still in charge if everyone hates her? She controls all the proxies," Sarah explained. "Most people in the neighborhood do not attend the annual meetings, so they sign proxy forms giving someone else the right to vote on their behalf. Patricia has spent years collecting these proxies. She literally cannot be voted out because she controls more than 60% of the votes." This was worse than I thought. Patricia had essentially created a dictatorship where she could do whatever she wanted, collect fines from residents, and never face any consequences. "Has anyone tried to organize against her?" I asked. David nodded. "Last year, a group of about 20 homeowners tried to gather enough proxies to challenge her. But the bylaws are written in a way that makes it almost impossible. You need 75% of homeowners to agree to change the board structure, and you need 60% to remove a sitting board member. Since Patricia controls 60% of proxies, the math does not work. That is insane." "Welcome to Pinewood Estates," Sarah said grimly. "Most people just keep their heads down and try not to get on her radar. You blocking that emergency exit probably put you at the top of her target list." She was right. Over the next 2 weeks, I received 5 more citations in the mail. My trash cans were visible from the street on a non-collection day. My front porch light was burned out, which violated community lighting requirements. My mailbox had a small dent that I had not even noticed. Each citation was $50. I was hemorrhaging money. I decided to fight back the only way I could, by following every single rule to the letter and documenting every single violation the HOA itself committed. I started carrying a camera with me everywhere. I photographed every instance of HOA rule violations I could find. The community center's lawn had patches of dead grass, which violated the landscaping standards. One of the streetlights was out, violating the lighting requirements. The HOA office building had a crack in its front window that had been there for months. I compiled everything into a detailed document and submitted it to the HOA board, demanding that they fine themselves for their own violations. I knew it was pointless, but it felt good. Patricia responded with a letter informing me that the community standards only applied to individual homeowners, not to HOA-managed properties. Of course they did. February turned into March, and the snow finally melted completely. I could use my driveway again, but the damage was done. I was now in a full-blown war with Patricia and the HOA, and I was losing. That was when I met Frank Kowalski. Frank was a 72-year-old retired civil engineer who lived on the other side of the neighborhood. He had heard about my situation through the neighborhood grapevine and invited me over for coffee one Saturday morning. "Vincent, I have been living here for 15 years. Frank said as we sat in his immaculate kitchen. "I have watched Patricia turn this HOA into her personal fiefdom, and I am sick of it. But I think I might have found a way to stop her. I am listening." He pulled out a thick folder full of documents. "I have been doing some research into the HOA's finances. As a homeowner, we are entitled to review the HOA's financial records. It took me 6 months of requesting documents and filing complaints, but I finally got access to everything." He spread out several spreadsheets on the table. "Look at this. The HOA collected over $300,000 in dues last year. Do you know where most of that money went? Snow removal." I guessed. Barely 10% went to snow removal. 20% went to landscaping and maintenance, which is reasonable. But nearly 40% went to something called management and administrative fees. And guess who receives those management fees? Patricia. Bingo. She has set up a management company that she owns, and the HOA pays that company nearly $120,000 per year to manage the community. But she is also drawing a salary as HOA president, which is another $30,000. So she is personally making $150,000 per year from this HOA. I stared at the numbers. Is that legal? That is the question. Most HOA bylaws prohibit board members from having financial conflicts of interest. I pulled our bylaws, and sure enough, there is a clause that says board members cannot receive compensation beyond reasonable expenses. But Patricia has been doing this for 8 years, and nobody has challenged it. "So what do?" Frank smiled. "We go to the state attorney general." Financial fraud in an HOA is a serious matter. If Patricia has been improperly enriching herself at the expense of homeowners, that is criminal. Over the next month, Frank and I worked together to compile a comprehensive complaint. We documented every payment from the HOA to Patricia's management company. We showed that the services her company provided could be obtained for a quarter of the cost from legitimate property management firms. We demonstrated that she was essentially paying herself with homeowner dues while providing minimal actual service. We also reached out to other homeowners, quietly building a coalition of people who were fed up with Patricia's reign. By mid-April, we had 47 homeowners who were willing to sign onto the complaint. We filed everything with the Vermont Attorney General's office on April 20th. 3 days later, Patricia showed up at my door. She looked different. The confident, smug expression was gone, replaced by something that looked almost like fear. "Mr. Brennan, we need to talk. I have nothing to say to you. You filed a complaint with the Attorney General." "I did." "Well, Frank and I did, along with 46 other homeowners who are tired of your corruption." "It is not corruption. Everything I have done is legal." "Then you have nothing to worry about. The Attorney General will investigate, and if you are right, nothing will happen. If you are wrong, well, I guess you will face the consequences." She stood there on my porch, and for the first time since I had met her, she looked uncertain. "I can fix this. I can remove the fines against you. I can make sure your driveway is never blocked again." "Too late for that. You should have thought about being reasonable before you decided to run this neighborhood like a dictator. Please, if this investigation goes forward, it will ruin me. I will lose everything." "Good." I closed the door. The Attorney General's investigation took 6 weeks. During that time, an investigator came to interview me, Frank, and dozens of other homeowners. They subpoenaed the HOA's financial records going back 10 years. They interviewed Patricia multiple times. On June 5th, the results came back. The Attorney General's office issued a formal report finding that Patricia had indeed violated HOA bylaws by enriching herself through her management company. More seriously, they found evidence of fraud. She had been submitting fake invoices for services that were never performed, essentially stealing money from the HOA. The total amount of fraudulent billing over 8 years was estimated at over $400,000. Criminal charges were filed. Patricia was arrested on June 10th and charged with wire fraud, theft, and embezzlement. The bail was set at $50,000, which she made, but her reputation was destroyed. The HOA immediately held an emergency meeting and voted unanimously to remove her from the board. The local newspaper covered the story, and it became a minor scandal in Burlington. Other HOAs in the area started auditing their own finances to make sure they did not have similar problems. A new HOA board was elected, and one of their first actions was to refund all the improper fines that Patricia had collected over the years. I got back every penny of the $750 she had fined me. They also rewrote the bylaws to include much stronger conflict of interest provisions and transparency requirements. Patricia's criminal trial took place in October. I attended every day, sitting in the courtroom and watching as the prosecution laid out the evidence of her fraud. She tried to argue that she had provided valuable services to the community and that her fees were reasonable, but the numbers did not lie. She had been systematically stealing from hundreds of homeowners for years. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours, guilty on all counts. In December, Patricia was sentenced to 3 years in federal prison and ordered to pay full restitution to the HOA, which meant selling her house and most of her assets. The judge was particularly harsh in his sentencing remarks, noting that she had betrayed the trust of her entire community for personal gain. I sat in that courtroom and felt a mix of emotions. Part of me was satisfied to see justice done. Part of me felt sad that it had come to this. But mostly, I just felt relieved that it was over. The new HOA board turned out to be reasonable and competent. They hired a legitimate property management company that charged reasonable fees and actually provided good service. Snow removal was handled professionally, with clear guidelines about where snow could and could not be placed. My driveway was never blocked again. Frank and I became good friends through all of this. We started a neighborhood watch program, not to spy on each other, but to help keep each other informed about HOA issues and to make sure no future board could become as corrupt as Patricia's had been. Life in Pinewood Estates actually became pleasant. Without the constant threat of arbitrary fines and petty enforcement, people started taking genuine pride in their homes and community. The neighborhood became the place I had hoped it would be when I first moved in. I learned some important lessons through this whole ordeal. First, always read every word of any contract you sign, especially HOA agreements. Second, when you see corruption or abuse of power, document everything. Third, you are not alone. When I thought I was fighting this battle by myself, it turned out there were dozens of other people who felt the same way and were just waiting for someone to take the first step. And fourth, sometimes doing something petty and stupid, like moving a snow pile to block an emergency exit, can be the catalyst that starts a chain of events leading to real change. I would not recommend it as a strategy, and I definitely paid a price for it with that misdemeanor citation and fine. But in a weird way, my act of spite was what finally got people's attention and made them realize that something had to be done about Patricia. As for Patricia herself, I heard she got out of prison after serving 18 months of her 3-year sentence. She moved to New Hampshire and, from what I understand, works a regular office job now. I do not wish her ill. I hope she learned something from the experience and lives a better life going forward, but I do not feel sorry for her either. She made her choices, and she faced the consequences. The Snowpile incident became something of a legend in the neighborhood. New residents hear the story and usually cannot believe it actually happened. But it did, and I have the photos and the misdemeanor citation to prove it. Some people think I am a hero. Some people think I am an idiot. I think I am probably a bit of both. One funny thing that came out of all this. The fire department used my case as a training example for why emergency exits must always be kept clear. Chief Edwards actually called me a few months after everything was settled and said, in a roundabout way, that while what I did was definitely wrong and illegal, it helped them illustrate the importance of fire safety codes. So I guess I accidentally did something good, even though I was just being spiteful at the time. The community center now has a camera system with better coverage, and there are signs everywhere reminding people about keeping emergency exits clear. I like to think I contributed to that improvement, even if it was in the most backwards way possible. It is now January again, a full year since this all started. We just had our first major snowstorm of the season last week, about 7 inches. The HOA's contracted snow removal company did an excellent job. They cleared all the streets and common areas, and they were careful not to block anyone's driveway. They even left a note on my door apologizing for a small amount of snow that ended up near my driveway entrance, and they came back the next day to clear it completely. That is what a properly run HOA looks like. That is what I should have had from the beginning. I still live at 428 Maple Ridge Drive. I still pay my HOA dues, but now they are actually going toward community improvements rather than lining someone's pockets. The neighborhood looks better than ever. People are friendlier. There is a real sense of community now in my driveway. It has been completely clear all winter. I can come and go as I please. It is such a simple thing, but after everything I went through, I never take it for granted. Sometimes on quiet evenings, I sit on my porch with a cup of coffee and look out at the neighborhood. I think about how close I came to just accepting Patricia's tyranny, to being like Robert and just keeping my head down. I think about how one moment of anger and spite set off a chain reaction that changed everything. I also think about all the other HOAs out there, all the other Patricias who are probably running their own little fiefdoms, enriching themselves at the expense of homeowners who just want to live in peace. I hope those homeowners find their own Frank Kowalskis, their own investigators, their own courage to stand up and demand accountability. Because here is the thing about HOAs. They are supposed to serve the homeowners, not the other way around. When that relationship gets inverted, when the HOA becomes a tool for control and profit rather than community improvement, something has gone fundamentally wrong. And it is up to the homeowners to fix it. It is not easy. It takes time, effort, documentation, and courage. You might have to do things that seem crazy, like moving a mountain of snow at 1 in the morning. You might get citations and fines and threats. But if you are willing to stand up and fight, and if you can find other people willing to fight alongside you, change is possible. I never set out to be some kind of HOA crusader. I just wanted to get to work without an 8-foot pile of snow blocking my driveway. But sometimes, life pushes you into situations where you have to decide. Are you going to accept injustice, or are you going to fight back? I chose to fight back. It cost me sleep, money, stress, and a misdemeanor on my record. But it was worth it. Not just for me, but for everyone in this neighborhood who was suffering under Patricia's corrupt regime. Last month, the HOA board asked if I wanted to join as a member. I politely declined. I have had enough of HOA politics to last a lifetime. But I did agree to serve on the Finance Oversight Committee, helping to make sure that what happened with Patricia never happens again. It is a small role, just reviewing the quarterly financial reports and making sure everything adds up. But it is important work. Frank is still my neighbor and my friend. We get together every Sunday morning for coffee and conversation. He is working on a guide for other HOA residents about how to audit their association's finances and identify potential fraud. He hopes to publish it online and make it freely available to anyone who needs it. The Chen family, David and Sarah, are doing well. Their mailbox is now the correct shade of matte black, though they joked about painting it hot pink just to make a statement. They decided to play it safe instead. Robert, my other neighbor, has come out of his shell. He was one of the 47 homeowners who signed onto the complaint against Patricia, and he told me it felt liberating to finally stand up to her after years of living in fear. He is a different person now, more confident and engaged in the community. As for my truck, it sits safely in my garage every night, just like the HOA rules require. But I can also park it in my driveway for as long as I want during the day, because the new board rewrote that ridiculous rule. Common sense has returned to Pinewood Estates. I learned that systems of power, even small ones like an HOA, can be corrupted by the wrong people. But I also learned that those systems can be fixed by ordinary people who are willing to stand up and demand better. You do not need to be rich or powerful or connected. You just need to be stubborn and persistent and willing to document everything. And sometimes, you need to be willing to do something a little crazy to get people's attention. Moving that snow pile to block the emergency exit was stupid and illegal and potentially dangerous. I am not proud of it, and I would not recommend anyone else do something similar. But it worked. It got the attention of the fire department, the police, and ultimately the Attorney General's office. It started the chain of events that brought down Patricia's corrupt regime. Would things have turned out differently if I had just accepted the blocked driveway and waited for the snow to melt? Maybe Frank would have still uncovered the financial fraud eventually. Or maybe Patricia would have continued her schemes for another decade, stealing even more money from unsuspecting homeowners. I will never know. What I do know is that standing up for yourself matters. Fighting back against injustice matters. And building a community of people who support each other matters. The snow is falling again as I write this. big fat flakes drifting down from a gray sky. I can see the HOA snow plow truck making its rounds, carefully clearing the streets without blocking anyone's driveway. It is almost midnight and I am sitting at my kitchen table, drinking coffee and watching the snow fall, feeling grateful for this ordinary, peaceful moment. My driveway is clear. My truck is in the garage. My home is my own again, not a source of constant stress and financial anxiety. And that is all I ever wanted. The story of the HOA that blocked my driveway has a happy ending, at least for me and my neighbors. Patricia is serving her time and paying her debt to society. The HOA is functioning properly. The neighborhood is thriving. Justice, in its slow and imperfect way, was served. But I know there are thousands of other neighborhoods out there dealing with their own Patricias, their own corrupt HOAs, their own blocked driveways, both literal and metaphorical. To those people I want to say, document everything, find your allies, and do not give up. Change is possible. It is not easy, but it is possible. And if you are thinking about buying a house in an HOA community, read that agreement. Read every single word. Understand what rights you are signing away. Ask questions. Talk to current residents. Do your research. Because once you sign on that dotted line, you are bound by those rules and getting out of them is nearly impossible. I got lucky in a weird way. My HOA president was not just annoying and petty. She was actually a criminal. That gave me and the other homeowners legal recourse that we otherwise would not have had. Most HOA disputes stay in the realm of civil law, where money and lawyers determine outcomes, and ordinary people usually lose. But even if your HOA is not criminal, just unreasonable, there are still options. Organize your neighbors. Attend meetings. Vote. Run for the board yourself. Use the system, even if the system seems rigged against you. Sometimes the only way to change a broken system is from within. The clock just struck midnight. A new day is beginning. Outside, the snow continues to fall, covering the neighborhood in a fresh white blanket. It is beautiful and peaceful. Tomorrow morning, I will wake up, make breakfast, and go about my day without worrying about whether my driveway will be blocked or whether I will find another citation in my mailbox. That is the real victory. Not the criminal conviction or the money refunded or the news coverage. The real victory is this: I can live in my own home in peace without constant harassment from a power-hungry HOA president. That is what everyone deserves. That is what everyone should fight for. So here is to clear driveways, honest HOAs, and the courage to stand up for what is right, even when it is hard. Here is to Frank and his financial investigations, to David and Sarah and their wrong shade of black mailbox, to Robert and his newfound confidence. Here is to everyone who has ever felt powerless in the face of bureaucratic tyranny and decided to fight back anyway. And here is to the snow, which started this whole mess and which now falls peacefully outside my window. Just weather, just winter, just life in Vermont. No longer a weapon, no longer a source of stress. Just snow. I finish my coffee, turn off the lights, and head to bed. Tomorrow is another day in Pinewood Estates, and for the first time since I moved here, I am actually looking forward to it. The story of how I moved a snowpile to block an HOA emergency exit is over. The larger story of standing up to corruption and fighting for a better community continues. It continues in every neighborhood where people choose courage over complacency. It continues in every HOA meeting where residents demand accountability. It continues in every act of documentation, every filed complaint, every conversation with a neighbor who thinks they are alone in their frustration. Change is possible. Justice is possible. A functioning, fair, honest HOA is possible. I am living proof of that, and if I can do it, anyone can.